r/AskReddit. Reddit. What's your best funniest personal example of petty revenge? This happened a while back. Study hall in 8th grade actually. I always brought 2 small sandwiches to school so I could have one at lunch and one in study hall since our teacher let us eat in that class. One day as I was about to eat my sandwich, I get up to use the bathroom. As I walk back in the classroom, I see the kid in front of me eating my sandwich. I was pretty annoyed but nothing serious at this point. So I confront him politely and he denies it completely. I left my sandwich on my desk the next day just to make sure it was him. And what do you know? It is. So on the 3rd day, I hatched a plan. I put habanero cheese on my sandwich, and then doused it all in ghost pepper sauce. That stuff was everywhere, but it luckily didn't smell spicy. I get to study hall and my plan works flawlessly. I leave my trap sandwich on my desk and get up to use the restroom. This time I take as long as I can, and end up wandering the halls of the school. I did this because my study hall teacher was anal about the hall pass, and only one guy was allowed to leave the class at a time, even for water. After about 10 minutes I come back into the class to be greeted by the sandwich thief crying hysterically with a bright red face waiting for the hall pass. He was in the bathroom for the rest of the day. My mom had a fantastic one. She was a language teacher at my high school and years after I had graduated, she called me kind of upset because a group of guys was trying to make her look dumb. The class was supposed to write one of those team dialogues in Spanish, and had a week or so to prepare it, then had to perform it in front of the class. When she called for them to do theirs, they said, "But we already did ours. We're not doing it again," she said. "You definitely didn't do it. I don't have any record of it here and I would remember it if you had." They refused to do it, insisting they already performed it and that it was her fault she didn't take notes scores down. She was feeling puzzled and questioning herself, when one of the good kids came and said, "They didn't do it. They were bragging about making you look stupid and threatened the whole class if they told you anything. But please don't tell them I told you this. I don't want any problems with them." These were those stereotypical dumb jock types who everyone was scared of for whatever reason. My mom was really into yoga at the time and got a great idea while meditating. She went in the next day and said, "Boys, I owe you an apology. I found my notes on your presentation and I do remember it. I don't know how I forgot." She went on to describe all the grammatical mistakes they made, that their dialogue hadn't been as long as required, that they didn't include the necessary vocabulary, etc. All made up. She failed them all on the project and they couldn't do a thing about it without admitting they'd made it all up. TLDR. My mom is awesome. When I was a kid I had a bedwetting problem. I am not ashamed of this now, as thousands of other kids have had the same problems. At the time however, this was humiliating. My younger brother started telling other kids around school how extensive the issue was. I was mortified. Even after our mother told him to knock it off, he continued. So I decided to level the playing field. The whole hand in cup of warm water deal didn't work. I stood over him as he slept one night and pissed on him. The next morning, my mom was horrified and wound up taking a call from my grandmother. "I don't know what to do. Now both of them are pissing the bed," she explained, clearly frustrated. After a few more times of framing my brother as a bedwetter, he completely stopped using my embarrassing problem as entertainment. Speeding up a coworker's double-click speed and watched him squirm when his normal double-clicking speed isn't working. Somebody once changed the mouse pointer on my chef's computer to the loading animation. We scratched our heads for a while before figuring it out. I have to admit, It was hilarious watching his mild irritation every day. I once had a colleague I hated. He was very condescending and really arrogant. So I put an extra Bluetooth receiver in his computer for a computer mouse and kept the mouse in my drawer. I would just open my drawer and it would mess his stuff right up. Kept it going for like 2 months. He was about to murder the world when I thought I better stop. Someone in my office would always crush lunches with his gigantic ass lunchbox. Either he ate bricks or lead. I don't know, but I always came to the office fridge and found that my lunch was in pieces. So, after 3 bouts of this, and numerous notes from myself and other colleagues, I carefully removed his lunchbox, emptied the contents, a gigantic sandwich, a Twinkie, chips, some vegetable pieces, and a few other bits, and ran over them with my car. I carefully packed it back in, and put it back. He kept his lunch in a cooler by his cube from then on. I was in a big meeting. 50 managers, supervisors, and 2 high-level guys made fun of my car, Subaru Outback. In their presentation, I had access to their personal info, phone, address, emails, and sent it to the Subaru sales group, asking for a test drive quotes etc. They got spammed pretty well for a while. I worked as a web designer in a small ad agency serving a very niche industry. Previously, the design team had no creative lead, and were all sort of operating independently across varying clients. We decided to hire a creative director to fill that gap, and I was given the task of sorting through and giving first-round interviews to find the person who would later become my supervisor. 2 candidates in particular stood out from the rest for very different reasons. One was exceptionally talented, an all-around nice guy, and somebody who generally would have been great for the role. The other, let's call him John, had mediocre talent, came across as an insufferable, arrogant prick, but had previous experience working within the niche industry that we serviced. He also had contacts within that industry that could lead to new business. Despite my strong recommendation to not hire John, his relationships in the industry were too compelling to our agency's leadership to pass up, and they hired him. It didn't take long before the entire company started to realize John was a huge burden. He had virtually zero experience in anything related to digital design. Design for apps, websites, mobile, etc., were all completely and utterly beyond his grasp. But he used his position of relative power to make decisions on those projects that the entire design team refused to support, most of which came back to bite the company in the ass later. The design team hated him, because fixing and working around his screw-ups became part of our daily routine. The sales team hated him, because he'd claim it took him unbelievably exaggerated amounts of time to complete even the most trivial of tasks. 4 days to design a business card template, so they wouldn't even assign him projects anymore. Work that was clearly his responsibility started to rapidly trickle down to the rest of the design team. We'd be working late nights 4 out of 5 days a week, because all of his projects that were in danger of missing deadlines would be reassigned to us. Meanwhile, he'd be the first to walk out the door every day, right at 5 p.m., without fail. On top of all that, the guy was absolutely, without a doubt, the biggest tool I've ever met. Always right about everything, completely unbending on his idiotic opinions, and completely clueless that literally every person in the building wished he would get hit by a truck. I genuinely tried to work with him for about a year, until I decided that the job had become intolerable because of him, and wasn't going to change anytime soon. So I turned in my 2-week notice. About a month after I left, I heard that he had been let go from the job. Shortly after that, I noticed that he had changed his LinkedIn status to show that he was working for a new agency I had never heard of, also servicing that same niche industry. I looked them up, and quickly figured out that he had started his own agency, a primarily digital agency, when he had no experience in digital or interactive design, and had literally messed up every digital interactive project he'd ever been on. I know, because most of them were reassigned to me when he proved incapable of doing them himself. I looked at the portfolio on his website, and found literally project after project of my work. He was using my work from the ad agency as examples of the work his agency could produce. I briefly considered contacting him and requesting he remove my work from his portfolio for ethical reasons. But I could already hear his reply in my head. As creative-led, all work done by my team is an extension of my creative direction. He'd used similar lines in the past to insert himself into receiving credit on successful projects he'd had zero involvement on. So instead I sent an email to one of the partners of the agency we both had worked for, saying something along the lines of, "Hey, not sure if you've noticed this, but it looks like John is using your company's intellectual property to directly compete against you. If I had to guess, I'd assume his next step would be to make a move at your client list." The reply was short and sweet. "Thanks for bringing this to my attention. He'll be hearing from our attorney in the morning." John's website was brought down less than 24 hours later. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for more Reddit content.